The City of Albuquerque Public Art Urban Enhancement Division and Department of Arts and Culture proudly present Take Another Look. Built on the foundation of two city ordinances, Art in Municipal Places, and the Urban Enhancement Trust Fund, the Public Art Urban Enhancement Division provides funds to artists to create art for the public, as well as arts organizations for arts and cultural programming. Join us as we discuss everything related to funding artists in the public realm with host Joni Palmer.
Hello, I'm Joni Palmer, and welcome back to Take Another Look at Albuquerque's Public Art. Thank you for tuning in today. Today I'm talking with Noel Begay, Public Art Project Coordinator for the Public Art Urban Enhancement Division, and local artist JP, to talk about their public art journeys. Today we're gonna start off a little bit different with this episode. I'm going to read the Albuquerque Arts Board Land, Lives, People Acknowledgement, which Noel wrote, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. So this is the official Albuquerque Arts Board Land, Lives, People Acknowledgement. The Albuquerque Arts Board meets on the traditional and occupied lands of the Tiwa people, with its nearest descendants being Sandia, Isleta, Laguna Pueblo. We are grateful of these ancestral lands and recognize that our acknowledgement is more than mere words and serves a much deeper purpose. It is the first step of progression to reconcile with the 23 federally recognized indigenous communities of New Mexico, and we strive for personal and professional excellence. For the city of Albuquerque to thrive today, the original Puebloan peoples, Diné Nation, and Apache nations had to endure genocide, displacement, and assimilation in order to rewrite the narrative of colonialism and its ongoing status. Acknowledgement also requires holding both the beauty and the pain in supporting ongoing dialogues and sharing of stories. It is with the deepest sincerity that we gather in honor of Indigenous resilience, continued stewardship, cultural preservation, and authentic history. We keep this in mind while we work to maintain healthy and abundant relationships with all Native communities. So let me tell you a little bit about my guests in the studio here today. So Noel is Diné. She's also a native New Mexican and is the Associate Public Art Project Coordinator with the Public Art Urban Enhancement Division. She studied art and art history. She completed her BFA in Fine Arts with an emphasis in printmaking and painting at the University of New Mexico. She was a former studio technician, curator with both UNM and CNM, which led to teaching summer art classes specializing in printmaking on the Navajo Nation. She eventually went forward with serving as a Native American liaison among multiple nonprofit Indigenous organizations, including missing and murdered Indigenous persons with the U.S. Justice Department and local law enforcement agencies. She has served as the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association intern, assisting with a national fundraising silent auction project. She volunteers with the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe with fundraising events for student scholarship monies to give to future students. She most recently provided administrative support for the City of Albuquerque's Environmental Health Department during 2020 to 2022. Yes. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Joni. Noel Begay initially, the Bessage initially, Tachini Bushchin, Cloke Dashache, the Topahin Dashanale, Nan George and Nasha, Bedil Dasanil. Thank you for having me here.
It's great to have you with us. And on the other side of me is JP. Is a bicultural and bigender artist, color explorer, tree steward, truth seeker, and community builder. Her transdisciplinary explorations exist in an ontological space developed through community social practice, ceremony sound, folk song, sculpture, site-specific installation, works on paper, and performance and present stories of ritual integration and spiritual journeys. He maps past, present, and future ecosystems of belonging and explores the porous relationship between truth, beauty, and identity. Their work has been shown nationally at art fairs, galleries, and museums, including the New Mexico Museum of Art, Louisiana Art and Science Museum, and the Vladam Contemporary. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Now that you know a little bit about my guests, I'm going to give you some context for this conversation. Today, we're continuing our conversations with artists, curators, advocates, poets, and arts administrators, talking about their practices and journeys into and through the field of public art. Last episode, I talked with Augustine Romero, gallery curator for Gallery 1 and the South Broadway Cultural Center, and artist Vanessa Alvarado to discuss the Gallery 1 exhibition, Interpretive Reflections, which closed last week on the 2nd of August. There's a lot happening in Albuquerque with regard to public arts, from the exhibits in City Hall's Gallery 1 to what's happening in the International District Library Public Art, the Public Arts Census, to upcoming work at Sunport, Sandia Science and Technology Park, and City Brights 2. But I want to note, JP is one of the recently selected artists for the Sunport, so we'll be talking about that in a few minutes. What makes me so excited about today's episode is that today's guests are two individuals who work in challenging yet productive spaces where the emotional, the physical, political, cultural, intellectual, and the spiritual intersect. They both know each other, and they've known each other for a little while now, and we'll get to that story in a few minutes as well. One of the aspects of their professional collaboration that I find most intriguing is, what is it like for Noel to be Indigenous, and for JP to be a bicultural Asian, gender-expansive artist? How is it working on and with the land, and how does that impact how one connects with the land, how one feels rooted and connected, or not? So I'm going to start with you, Noel. Tell us about your role in the public art program and how you got to this particular position.
Yes, thank you, Joni, for that great introduction. You pretty much laid it all out how I got here, and I'm so grateful I don't have to really go back into it. But there's a lot that came into me coming here, and ultimately it came down to my boss, Sherry Brueggerman, giving me a chance, because throughout my life, I've strived to get to a position like this and continue to strive for it, just mostly for representation, to show my nieces and my nephews that there's possibilities within government entities such as this. So my role here with public art has been such a journey. It's been me giving that Indigenous lens perspective through everything that I do. And it's been challenging, that's for sure, but I'd say that's the ultimate form of what I've been bringing to public art, along with learning aside the everyday in and out events that we have, our arts board committee, learning who they are, where they come from, and just having support from the entire public art staff in me challenging them with questions about what's appropriation versus appreciation.
Yeah, and let's use that as a segue into, if you could tell us a little bit about the Land, Lives, People acknowledgement that you wrote for the Albuquerque Arts Board. Like, why was that created, and what was the process?
Yes. So it was interesting. When I first started back in June of 2023, I went to my first Arts Board meeting on my second day. And really threw me in there. And they were telling me at the meeting that at the time it was called just a land acknowledgement, and they were asking amongst themselves, do we still need this in place? Why should we have it here? Because it seems more so performative and nothing's very lackluster. So I took that very personally. It was very hard because I do internal work as well, just trying to take grace with people and taking educational moments. So I approached Sherry about this after the meeting and asked her the background of why it was in question in the first place. She told me essentially the same thing that I heard at the Arts Board, and I told her that I haven't heard any other board or committee really have a land acknowledgement that they normally have in place at any of their meetings. So I took it upon myself, because the people that took care of this land and this place need to be acknowledged. It's very much so in modern society that Native peoples are put in the background. They are put in a past tense, and I needed to stand up for us, stand up for other marginalized groups as well as Indigenous peoples. But it just became a personal endeavor to create something that came from a vulnerable place, but also to speak truth into this acknowledgement.
And there's powerful language in there.
There is. A little note of is, a part of what we're doing with the Lands, Lives, and People acknowledgement now in the Arts Board meetings is we are taking turns in reading it. And
Okay.
A part of that language is there specifically like genocide. Not a lot of people really say that in conversation at all. It's because mostly due to being afraid and having that conversation open at all, I feel like. So that was very intentional.
Well, I'm going to turn over to our other guest, and what does this acknowledgement mean to you, and what does it do for you as an artist?
Yeah, I had been working through my residency with the Artists at Work program last year, doing a public program with Asian people in Albuquerque to do storytelling. And I'd been opening that program with a land acknowledgement and a labor acknowledgement. So I did a lot of research on both. and it brought up a lot in terms of what it means to tell and share story as Asian community, as well as what that means to do on this land. And so it just became, it opened up more and more questions for me as the program went on. And then I came to the January Arts Board meeting to present my unsolicited proposal to continue the project further. And this is where I first met Noel and heard the Land, Lives, and People acknowledgement. And I was pretty struck by it. I felt like it was just expansive and encapsulated a lot more than I had seen in any other land acknowledgement that I had come across in my research. And also, it expands open space for non-Indigenous people to participate in something. And I think that was really important to me because that is something that I intend to do in my personal life as well as the projects that I have going on, and to do this hopefully respectfully. So yeah, it was just like a relief to hear, quite honestly.
Yeah. And the titling of it,
Yes.
right? I mean, Land, Lives, People.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I just want to add in, my background is Diné. I am full Diné. I grew up as urban Indigenous, so that meant I went from home, traditional lands, to cities, and kind of it just like went in between those worlds. So I had to learn how to navigate these kinds of conversations, and which is why I'm also super open to having the conversations of like deeper meaningful, almost scary conversations. Some people might approach it as. And I had mentioned prior that when we were speaking earlier, the three of us, my people are long-winded, and I'm a storyteller. So
Storyteller, yeah.
I also wanted to add in that when I was coming up with this Land Lives People acknowledgement, again, it happened the very first month of me being here. So I was in the probationary period, and I was like, how far can I push these buttons, and whose buttons will it push? And I had, potential for possibly being let go just as a, test or trial run, and that was the risk I was willing to take. But that's my little added note to it. And I'm trying to hold back a little bit.
But your acknowledgement and part of why it's so different from so many that I've heard at conferences and at other events is you're asking us, those of us who hear it, who read it, is to think about the past, the present, and possible futures. And it's engagement. It's a call to action. And that's what I find most powerful about it.
That's great to hear. I've heard other sentiments, but not going into why. It's so great. You're so grateful for it. Along outside of JP, expressing your gratitude for it, I really appreciate it. I had an arts board member mention it as well, but it took research in the sense of I've been a part of these conversations before. I've heard the conferences and they're one or two sentences, and they don't even acknowledge the actual people that are there in those spaces. So I felt like it just needed to happen in, again, the most vulnerable place that I could, and coming from a place of, again, educational moments. Not reprimanding people. It's just leading with harmony, and love.
So what else have you been working on? And while you're pretty early in your career in the department, and how is it that you two have been working together?
Yeah. So the other aspects of my job, I said I bring the Indigenous lens to everything. It's lately, the most recent project is I have been challenging people's usage of the Zia symbol because it is a stolen symbol. And I understand that people have pride for New Mexico and the flag. However, there's such a disservice to Zia Pueblo, and I see them as my brothers and sisters. And if no one else is asking that question of, are you desecrating the symbol for its true and initial intentions, no one else is going to ask it if I can, and especially in these governmental spaces. So I've been challenging that. I've also been trying to bring Diné philosophy into my workplace as much as possible, and that led to open conversations with JP, because JP is probably the only and first artist I've encountered in my career here, but they've been so open and wanting to know and understand the process in a way that other artists have not reached out. And so it's been amazing because I've gotten to know you, JP, in a different way, professionally, through accepting the harshness in realizing how you can root in a place. And the minimal, to me, the minimal ask of these people's land who we're on for permission. So with JP's piece, you can go into that at some point, but it's asking these Puebloan people and even Diné Nation for permission to even create a piece on this land that's not theirs.
Yeah. And so let's use that as, moving on to you talking a little bit about how you got started as an artist and how you, the public art work that you do.
Yeah, so I really came out of more of a gallery background until the last 3-ish or so years. I had been wanting to jump into like a more public art realm, community-based work for a while, but found that leap to be a little bit difficult. and I also did feel a little bit constrained in the gallery system, and there were some challenges there that came up. So I've been relieved in the last few years it's been really hard to make the transition, but also opened up a lot of space. And I think the first residency I had really helped me kind of bridge that gap.
And that residency was?
The Artists at Work residency in the Borderlands region.
Okay.
So I was working with the City Arts and Culture District, as well as a community partner, which was New Mexico Asian Family Center, on my my project called My Story is Golden, which was the Asian storytelling project here in Albuquerque.
Okay.
So, and what has, to address what Noel was saying, is that program was a storytelling program, and I ended up audio recording many stories. It was very tender. More than 60% of the participants are immigrants or refugees, and so there was a lot that was shared that was very personal and very like what people go through as diasporic people, and then also that opened up these questions of like where do we belong? Do we get to belong? How do we root in a space like this that is we're existing on stolen land and weren't invited to come? So that's when I heard Noel's land acknowledgement. I was compelled to reach out and also tender about it, because sometimes just the reaching out can create a harm if someone doesn't want to engage. But I kind of sensed and hoped that Noel would be open to it, and she was, and that kind of started our journey together.
That's great.
Yeah, and as part of the Indigenous peoples, I can speak mostly, again, for Diné Nation, is that we have these kinships, and clans are in place of that. And that was in the beginning of the episode where I introduced myself to create relations with whomever is listening outside of this room. Even some of the people here could possibly be a relative. And I wanted to encourage JP that we are like an adoptive culture. We welcome people in so long as you are respectful about it. One of my clans is an adoptive clan, and it so happens to be translated and a part of Zia Pueblo, which is interesting because throughout my life I never really thought of it until I started challenging for the Zia sign. I'm like, oh, it's probably because of this. But I wanted to, again, encourage JP that if anybody has a right to root, or feel like they are displaced and they want to create a home, you have the right to do that. And again, if it's done respectfully, you're going to be looked at from our culture and from our spaces in a completely different way, whereas most government entities don't do that.
Right.
Which is, what creates that us versus them.
Right, that tension, right?
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, you have work that's going to be completed at the Sunport. What is that project?
Yeah, so that's going to be a mural project at the TSA security line. It's a really large wall. It's 50 feet wide by 17 feet tall. And it's going to be a mixed media mural. So there's going to be paint as well as fabric sculpture and different sculptural elements, including thread, that will build this mixed media mural. And it's actually based on the Korean royal painting, which is a depiction of land that is physical as well as spiritual. It's a mountain, 5 mountain peaks and a sun and a moon. And although it's based on a culture that's not predominant here in New Mexico, my intent is to connect intercontinentally as well as cross-culturally land, people, and cultures, and create a space that's really inclusive. And so I'm doing some things there that could be sticky for, because it's like depiction of land. So again, it comes to this moment of questioning, do I get to depict this land? And what is the land that's being depicted? It's physical, it's intercontinental, but it's also spiritual. So there's just like a lot at play.
And what does, these two projects, how are they related? And
I think they both enter into what's called the third culture space. So like My Story is Golden is Pan-Asian, but it's also becoming cross-cultural because I have work to do with the Pueblos and the To'ajale Navajo in order to ask permission to root into the land, and for the community to root into the land. And then the Sunport project is called We Are of the Mountain, and that one also enters a third culture space, both because it's really hybrid. The land that's being depicted is physical but also spiritual, so it's got this very kind of hybrid space, hopefully inceptive space that I'm going for. And then both are dealing with land and like intercontinental tracings and like cross-cultural reach, and I hope developing kinship with land and people that are of the land. So they're built with the layers, so there's going to be a lot of translucency, literal translucency in the mural project, and then sort of I guess you could consider it translucent too. There'll be layered audio of the voices and stories that were shared in the other project. And then, definitely cross-cultural community building is the hope. And just honoring community through both projects.
so it's research, but it's also working with people, their lives, the land.
Definitely, yeah.
Right, so your research and kind of how do you prepare to do this is really varied.
Yeah, it's not what I think people would expect necessarily. So for the mural project, I'm actually quite literally going to trace intercontinental land. So I'm going to Korea in September, and I'm going to hike Jirisan Mountain, which is a mountain range across the southern portion of Korea. And I've been called to this mountain for a couple years. I woke up 2 years ago and just had this sensing, like, sounds a little wacky, but it basically said, go look on a map and see where Albuquerque intersects with Korea. And it was the southern part of Korea. And later I learned about this mountain ridge hike you can do from east to west, that is where Albuquerque intersects.
Oh, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, I'll be integrating portraits of trees from that land that have relationship to the trees here, the poplars and the pines. They're related. I mean, the trees are kin to each other in this landscape. So.
May I add something to that?
Yeah, please.
I was just going to say, you mentioned it might sound kind of crazy, like you're being called to the mountains for it. But a huge part of my work here, again, with being Diné and bringing our philosophies to it, is we have such a connection with land that Hollywood has depicted in a way of it's just extra stereotypical, and it doesn't quite even scrape the top surface of why land is so important to us. With my teachings and what my elders gave me and my ancestors passed down from them, come from creation stories. We came from people and places and beings, with, animals being friends and completely are directly related to trees and mountains and the sky and Mother Earth. And a reason why JP's projects are so delicate, and I appreciate the time JP has been putting into this research, is because they're trying to understand where completely an Indigenous view is in retrospect to that. A mini explanation of this for myself is the horned toad that everybody loves so much. That's, a desert little creature. In Navajo, we call him Che, and that's a direct relation. He's my grandpa. And so whenever I see him out and about, I know he's praying for me, and I know he's there as a sign that things are going to be okay. So with JP reaching out to our peoples to ask for permission, it's just respecting the fact that the land is a being, the land is a living and very powerful, beautiful thing.
Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up, and I say this at the end of every conversation, is I wish it could be longer. But any last thoughts?
I think I'm just happy to have found this relationship in a professional space, but it's like personal too. It bridges, and then there's something about that keeps coming up for me around vulnerability. I feel like a lot of the healing work, we have to be just very vulnerable with each other. It was scary for me to approach Noel, but it was more scary not to. And then it was hard and scary to write those letters. But I could be ignored, or I could be told no, and then I have decisions to make, right? But it's I can't not do the work. And so I'm just really trying to lean into that fear.
Yeah, and same sentiments. I'm just grateful for this relationship, and ultimately I offer everybody out there, any artist, any curator, anybody really, I offer myself as a resource for you to want to understand. If you want to know more, my door is always open. And I can be an ally as long as you let me be.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you both for being in the studio today.
That was fun. Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, dear listeners, I hope that this episode has given you some insights about these artists' journeys. And I want to provide you with a couple resources that Noel would like to share with you all. And these, along with a few others, will also be in the podcast e-newsletter. So the first one is the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. And this group is in Albuquerque. You can find them on Instagram at CSVANW. The other organization is Missing and Murdered Diné Relatives Coalition, and they're based in Gallup. You'll find them on Instagram at Navajo MMDR, so NAVAJOMMDR. So thank you for sharing those with us.
Yeah, thank you for giving the space too.
Of course. And if you want to learn more about JP's work, you will find their work at Instagram at 3_ with no space between, jp.art, 3_ no space between. You'll also find her on YouTube at JP is Infinite. JP is capitalized, Infinite is capitalized. And then also her website is jpisinfinite.art, and that's all lowercase. You can see her work at an exhibit at the Richard Levy Gallery. If you go to their website, you can learn a little bit more about her work as well as the work of some of their compatriots in this work. The exhibit runs July 31st through September 14th. The panel discussion is on Friday, the 6th of September at 5:45 with an artist reception at 7. All right, so if you all haven't been jotting all of this information down, which I hope you haven't if you're driving, or if you're like me, walking, all of this information is in our newsletter, and you can find that and subscribe at cabq.gov/publicart/podcast. So thank you for listening. I hope you will join us for our next episode, which will be released on Wednesday, September 11th. We hope that after you've listened to this podcast, that you will take another look at Albuquerque's public art. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the Albuquerque Public Art Program, the Public Art Collection, opportunities for artists, and so much more, visit cabq.gov/publicart. To learn more about the Urban Enhancement Trust Fund, visit cabq.gov/UETF. Tune in next time to take another look at the City of Albuquerque Public Art Urban Enhancement Division.